Welcome back for another deep dive. You guys gave us a real treat this time. Robert Cialdini's Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion.
A classic for sure.
And we've got the revised edition, so we're good. We're up to date, you know?
It's the Bible of persuasion. Not just for marketing, though, right?
Exactly.
This is for anyone who wants to understand, like, just how the world works.
Yeah.
You know, how people try to get us to do stuff.
It's like a decoder ring for everyday life, for sure.
Yes.
Okay, so our deep dive mission today, should we choose to accept it, is to really break down Cialdini's 6 key principles of persuasion.
So you can see them coming.
Exactly. See them coming a mile away. And when you see them, you can be like, I know what you're doing.
You're onto them, yeah.
Okay, so Cialdini, right off the bat, admits something pretty interesting in the introduction. He says, all my life, I've been a patsy.
He's the first to admit it.
Yeah.
That's what led him to study it, I think, right? I mean, if you've been tricked a lot, you want to know why.
Right. Like, well, why do I keep falling for this?
Exactly. And what's interesting is he didn't just study this in, like, you know, some ivory tower, right?
No, yeah.
This guy, he went undercover. He embedded himself with, like, the pros.
Oh, yeah, those salespeople, the fundraisers.
The recruiters,
Yeah.
those guys. For 3 years, he was learning all the tricks of the trade.
Really getting his hands dirty. I'm trying to imagine him, like, undercover at a used car lot or something.
Right. He wanted to see these principles in action.
And he really gets into it with that crazy anecdote about the mother turkey.
Oh, yeah, the cheap.
The cheap, cheap sound, right? So for anyone who hasn't heard this one, imagine a mother turkey, totally devoted to her chicks.
Protective, yeah.
So naturally, she responds to that cheap, cheap sound, right? That's how she identifies her babies.
Survival instinct right there.
Exactly. But if it doesn't make that sound, she'll, like, ignore it. Or worse, it's brutal.
It's nature. It is what it is.
So researchers decided to get kind of cruel. They introduced a stuffed polecat.
A natural enemy.
Right. Like, this is public enemy number 1 for a turkey. And
Another turkey goes on the attack. Unless
it's playing the cheap, cheap recording. Then she's like, oh, come here, little buddy.
Totally fooled. It shows how powerful these fixed action patterns are, these automatic responses.
And Cialdini argues we're the same way. We have these mental shortcuts, like that expensive equals good idea.
Oh, for sure. We do that all the time.
It's like that story in the book with the jewelry store. They couldn't sell this turquoise jewelry to save their lives. Then accidentally, the price got doubled.
And suddenly, it's flying off the shelves.
People thought it must be amazing because it was more expensive.
They assumed quality. Right.
Yeah.
We do it all the time.
So persuaders, they exploit these shortcuts.
Oh, absolutely. They don't need to change us. They just work with what's already there, like jujitsu.
And that leads perfectly into that contrast principle, how we juggle things not in isolation, but...
Compared to what comes before.
Yes. He uses the example of, like, dipping your hand in water, right?
Yeah, lukewarm water feels hot or cold depending on what you touched before.
Crazy how our senses work. And Cialdini says this is used all the time in sales.
Car dealerships, furniture stores, you name it. They'll show you the expensive thing first.
So that everything else seems like a bargain. Have you ever fallen for that?
Who hasn't, right?
I love that story from one of the readers about Sharon.
Sharon, yeah, the college student, classic.
She wanted to ask her parents for permission to get a tattoo.
Bold move.
Right. So she knew her parents would never go for it. But she asks them something even crazier first.
Like what?
She asks if she can drop out of college and move in with her boyfriend.
Oh, man. Talk about playing hardball.
And of course, the parents are like, absolutely not. So Sharon's like, okay, fine. How about a small tattoo then?
Genius.
The tattoo now seems totally reasonable in comparison, right?
Like, how can they say no to that after the other request?
Right.
The contrast principle in action.
It's like learning a new language, this whole persuasion thing.
For sure. A language we all speak without realizing it.
And the more you know, the more you can start to see it everywhere and protect yourself.
It's true. It's like you're building up a resistance.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to our listeners out there, you're not defenseless.
Oh, you've got this. You can totally navigate this world of influence. You can spot these tactics a mile away.
This is just the beginning of our deep dive. We've got a lot more to uncover. Stick with us. Makes you think twice about those free gifts, huh?
Oh, for sure. Speaking of clever tactics, though, let's talk about the reciprocity rule.
It's a big one. This idea that we have to give back if we get something, even if we never wanted it in the first place.
It's hardwired, isn't it? Like that feeling of obligation. Cialdini gives that crazy example of Ethiopia, you know.
Ethiopia.
Yeah, back in '85, they sent aid to Mexico after that huge earthquake.
Oh, right. I remember that.
But here's the thing. Ethiopia was one of the poorest countries in the world at that time.
Wow. So why would they?
Because, get this, 50 years earlier, Mexico had sent aid to Ethiopia.
No way. During the Italian invasion.
Yep. Talk about returning the favor.
50 years later. That's wild.
That's the power of reciprocity. Even half a century later, facing their own hardships.
They felt obligated.
Powerful stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't even have to be something big either. Think about those free samples at Costco.
Oh, yeah. You walk out with a full stomach and 3 memberships.
Right. Or those free gifts in the mail.
You feel like you got to reciprocate.
It's like they're leveraging your sense of guilt. There was this study, right, by Reagan. People who got a Coke from someone were way more likely to buy raffle tickets from them later.
Even if the soda was warm.
Even if they didn't like the guy. It's about the gesture. And it plays right into those Hare Krishna tactics.
Giving out flowers for donations.
It's brilliant. Cialdini calls it uninvited debt. You feel like you owe them. And he even ties it back to the contrast principle.
Oh, how so?
Think about it. A concession like, I'll give you a discount, or I'll throw in this bonus. It seems huge after you've asked for a lot, right?
Oh, totally. It's all about perception.
Exactly.
This is wild stuff. Okay, ready for the next one?
Hit me.
Commitment and consistency. Cialdini quotes Da Vinci on this one. It is easier to resist at the beginning than at the end.
Ain't got the truth.
Once we've committed to something, even a tiny thing.
We want to be consistent with that choice. It's powerful. Have you ever been locked into something, even when it's not the best idea anymore?
Oh, all the time. Sunk cost fallacy, right? Like, I've come this far, I can't turn back now.
Exactly. And it's not just in our heads. Cialdini talks about those bettors at the racetrack, remember?
No, what happened?
People who'd already bet on a horse, they were way more confident in their horse winning, even though nothing about the horse had actually changed.
So, just the act of placing the bet.
Increased their confidence.
Yeah.
They were committed. And this isn't just about external pressure either. Remember that toy robot study by Friedman?
Refresh my memory.
He told these kids they couldn't play with this awesome robot, right? Some got a mild threat. Others were told to think about why they shouldn't play with it.
Yeah.
Weeks later, those who'd internalized the reason, they were less likely to play with it, even when Friedman wasn't there.
It's like they'd convinced themselves.
Exactly. And this is why written commitments, they're gold. Cialdini gives that example from the Chinese POW camps.
Oh, right. The Korean War, right?
The Chinese, they were masters of this. They'd offer these tiny prizes, cigarettes, fruit, just for writing pro-communist essays.
Wow, so they weren't even forcing them or anything?
Nope. The essays, they didn't even have to be like hardcore or anything, just mildly anti-American. Cialdini's words.
It's amazing how such a small thing
Can shift your whole attitude.
Right?
Have you ever felt more committed to something after writing it down?
100%. Goals, to-do lists, even just like journaling, something about seeing it.
Makes it real.
Yeah.
And it's even stronger when it's public, right?
Oh, totally. Like that teacher's whiskey ad?
Oh, yeah. They wanted people to handwrite testimonials.
For a chance to win money, right?
Exactly. So by writing it down, you're more likely to.
Believe it yourself?
Public commitments, man, they're tough to break. It's like you're putting your reputation on the line.
It's like those resolutions we post on social media, right?
Exactly. Even if you want to delete it later, you're like, everyone saw it, I got to stick with it now.
Speaking of commitment, have you ever been lowballed?
Who haven't? Cialdini has that story about Dylan Dan, the car salesman. Classic. Offered this incredibly low price, got the customer excited.
Hook, line, and sinker.
Then, oops, I made a mistake. The price is actually higher.
No way. That's so messed up.
But it worked because people were already mentally committed. They imagined themselves driving off the lot in that new car.
So they're more likely to go through with it even when the initial reason, the low price, is gone.
It's crazy. Even Cialdini himself got lowballed once.
What? No way. By who?
He agreed to participate in a study at 7 a.m., but he found out later that it was on a Saturday.
Ouch. Did he still do it?
He did. He'd committed.
Wow.
No.
So even the expert can get tricked. We're all vulnerable, huh?
It's true.
Okay, so how do we fight back against this lowball tactic? What's the defense?
Be willing to walk away. Even when you feel that pull of, I already said yes.
Easier said than done, right?
It takes practice. But it's worth it.
Totally. Okay, give me another principle.
All right, let's talk about social proof. Basically, we decide what's right by looking at what everyone else is doing.
Especially when we're not sure what to do. Like, oh, everyone else is buying this, so it must be good.
Exactly. It's like those laugh tracks on sitcoms. They're there to make you laugh, even if the jokes aren't funny.
So manipulative.
But effective. Cialdini uses that example of the doomsday cult. These people, they believed the world was ending.
Oh, I think I read about this. They thought they were going to be rescued by aliens or something.
Spaceship.
Right.
Right. But the appointed time came and went. No spaceship. No end of the world. So you'd think they'd give up, right?
Yeah, you'd think.
But no. They doubled down on their beliefs. They became even more convinced they were right.
Right. What? Why?
They were looking for validation. See, when the prophecy failed, it created a ton of uncertainty.
So what did they do?
They turned to each other for reassurance, and they started recruiting new members like crazy.
So they were trying to convince themselves by convincing others.
Exactly. Social proof in action.
Wow. So the more uncertain we are, the more we rely on others. That's kind of scary when you think about it.
It can have some really dark consequences, like the story of Kitty Genovese.
Oh my gosh, that's awful. I remember that case. She was murdered and nobody helped.
38 neighbors witnessed it, and nobody did a thing. It's called the bystander effect.
The bystander effect. That's when people are less likely to help when there are others around.
Exactly. It seems counterintuitive, but there's something about being in a crowd that makes us less likely to act. Cialdini says it's because of this thing called pluralistic ignorance.
Pluralistic what now?
Pluralistic ignorance. Basically, we look around, and if nobody else is reacting, we assume everything's fine.
So we think if it was a real emergency, someone would be freaking out.
Right. But the problem is everyone else is thinking the same thing, so nobody does anything.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
So what do we do? If we're ever in trouble, how do we break through that?
Cialdini has some great advice for this. If you need help, single someone out. Make eye contact and be specific. Don't just yell, help. Point at someone and say, you in the red shirt, call 911.
So you have to be direct.
Exactly. You have to make it clear that this is an emergency and you need that person's help.
That's really good advice. Wow, this is heavy stuff. Okay, let's move on. What's next on our list of persuasion principles?
All right, let's lighten things up a bit. Let's talk about similarity. This one's pretty straightforward. We like people who are like us.
Birds of a feather flock together.
Exactly. And we're more likely to say yes to their requests. Compliance professionals, they know this.
So they try to find common ground, like, oh, you like the Yankees. Me too.
Exactly. They might mirror your body language, dress like you, even try to match your energy level.
It's about building rapport, right? Making you feel like you're on the same team.
Precisely.
Makes you feel all warm and fuzzy inside, right?
Right. And that's when they strike.
Cialdini talks about Tupperware parties, right?
Oh, yeah. Classic example. It's your friend selling, so you feel obligated to buy.
Peer pressure, even as adults.
Totally. Or those referral programs.
Oh, the tell a friend, get a discount kind of thing.
Exactly. They're banking on your social connections.
It's all connected. So what makes us like someone in the first place?
Well, Cialdini, he breaks it down. Physical attractiveness, for one.
Right, that halo effect thing.
Attractive people, we just assume they're good. Trustworthy, intelligent, the whole 9 yards. Cialdini even talks about how
they get away with more. Like, juries are more lenient with attractive defendants.
That's crazy, right? But it's true.
Wild. What else?
Similarity, obviously. We talked about that.
Yeah.
Compliments, even if they're fake.
Yeah.
Cialdini says there was a study. People believed praise, even when they knew it was insincere.
Wow. We're that desperate for validation.
Apparently so. Contact and cooperation, like that jigsaw classroom we talked about.
Wow.
And association. Like, if you're the bearer of good news, people will like you more.
Even if you had nothing to do with the good news.
It's true. Think about those celebrity endorsements. Companies use that all the time.
It all ties together, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So we've got liking, and then, last but not least, authority.
The big kahuna.
Right. We're basically taught to obey authority figures from the time we're kids.
It's ingrained.
Yeah.
Cialdini talks about that Milgram experiment.
The one with the electric shocks?
Yeah. People were willing to shock another person, potentially fatally, just because a guy in a lab coat told them to.
It's scary how easily we can be influenced like that.
It really is. And it's not just explicit orders either. Titles, uniforms.
Oh, like that guy who was always mistaken for a doctor just because he was hanging out with Merv Griffin.
Exactly. People just assumed he was important.
We're so easily swayed by appearances.
Oh, for sure. Remember that rectal earache story?
The eardrops. Oh, gosh, that's awful.
The doctor wrote, "Place in our ear" on the prescription.
Right. But the nurse read it as rear.
Exactly. And administered the eardrops.
Well, just because it was written down by a doctor, that's terrifying.
It shows how important it is to question authority. Just because someone has a fancy title or seems confident doesn't mean they're always right.
So we have to be willing to speak up, ask questions.
Presumably, don't just blindly follow orders.
All right, good advice. Okay, final principle. Scarcity. We want what we can't have.
It's true. Cialdini says it's because we hate losing more than we like gaining.
Loss aversion. It's powerful stuff.
Oh, yeah. Think about those limited time offers or those only 2 left in stock messages. They prey on that fear of missing out.
Totally. So what do we do? How do we fight that urge to buy something just because it's running out?
Cialdini says to ask yourself, would I still want this if it wasn't scarce?
That's a good one.
It's about separating your desire from that artificial urgency.
So if we can learn to spot these tactics, to question our own reactions.
We can break free.
This has been incredible,
Yeah.
eye-opening, but a little terrifying too, right? It's like the world is trying to manipulate us at every turn.
It can feel that way. But knowledge is power, right? Now you know the tricks. You can't be fooled so easily.
It's like having X-ray vision to people's intentions.
Exactly.
So to our listeners out there, we're not saying be paranoid.
No, just be aware. Be conscious.
Exactly. You're in control. You have the power to say yes or no.
And that's what Cialdini wants us to remember. We're not powerless. We have a choice.
This has been fantastic deep dive. Thank you so much for breaking it all down for us.
My pleasure. Influence is everywhere. Glad we could shed some light on it.
And to our listeners, keep those persuasion detectors on high alert. Until next time.